Why am I just suddenly got like butterfly nervous. Hey, Internet. Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, and that means you've been paid for. That makes you immortal now, and he's not going to be long anyway. The water seals it, the food feeds it. This is Christianity. You found Stop the White Noise with Jonathan and Meredith. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Meredith.
Stop the White Noise is brought to you by Mad Christianity. You can find Mad Christianity first and foremost at Mad Christian Mondays. Go check it out at madpxm.com. Sign up for the newsletter every Monday. Best news on the internet, in your inbox. Fact-checked as far as anybody can tell with the way the fact-checkers these days are getting paid to do who knows what. We're not getting paid, but we're trying to find out what the real stuff is for you so you know how to navigate your Christian life in this mad and crazy world. Mad Christian Mondays brings you Stop the White Noise, as well as brought to you by the Hebron Collegium, a gap year Bible school, one-year school for men here in Rockford, Illinois. You can come and set your trajectory for righteousness at the Hebron Collegium. For more information, send an email to revfisk.com/contact. And by the way, all the questions that we will be answering tonight are from you because one of you sent them to revfisk.com/contact. That's revfisk.com/contact for questions for Stop the White Noise, as well as to, again, learn more about the Hebron Collegium here in Rockford, Illinois. So there we go. Can I just keep rattling off advertisements? I don't know. We'll bring the rest of them back later.
What do you want to advertise?
Patreon.
Oh, Patreon is a blessing.
It is a blessing. It is. It makes the Fisk household go round.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but we'll come back to that later. Brief History of Power. It's a good thing too.
Oh,
Sons of Solomon. I
Brief
haven't
History of
advertised.
Power.
You've been listening.
I've been listening.
This is
finally
like the first time you've listened to my stuff.
Oh, well,
in a good long time.
I think about a year.
Okay.
To be honest.
Okay.
The last time I listened was a few episodes after you went from. Are you distracting people?
No, I'm just. It's product placement. They don't pay me nothing. They should. Stevia. It tastes like cream soda.
Yeah, it's like the carnivore cream soda.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, what is in that container?
I don't know. I'm worried about my inability
like,
to get back to target weight and whether or not it's one of these a day that's doing it, honestly. But
I listened to a few episodes of Brief History of Power when you started, and then I stopped just because it's a little challenging with my vocation to find time when I can listen to something and actually ingest it instead of just have it be noise in the background. And so this week I got to go put paint on the walls at the Hebron Collegium, and I have been over there in a lot of solitude. Binging
Brief History of Power.
It's strange because I feel like you've been there with me, and now I get it, viewers. I get it. I get the cards and the letters that say things like, you are with us in our living room on Saturdays every day. It's like you're here. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of creepy.
Eerie. Yes. The magical methodology of modern media.
Well, right. And I've been listening to Dr. Kuntz so often that I'm like, oh yeah, Kuntz and I, we're tight. But whoa, no, we're not.
You have sat with him at table.
I've had the honor of hosting him and getting to know his family over the years. That's been a blessing. But that the way that media kind of messes with us and makes us feel like, oh yeah, this person's my bestie.
Yeah, right.
It's creepy when you are a little more objective about it.
What I want to know is, so are you my fan now?
I'm a fan.
Oh, good.
I'm a fan. Honestly, it's interesting. There was a little bit of a shift in the way that you interacted with Kuntz, maybe in the fall, and I like it.
Okay.
I really like it.
Can you
there's
pinpoint
more of
that?
a calm presence.
All right, sure.
That you bring.
I was intimidated early on, honestly.
Yeah.
I really was.
Yeah.
Keeping pace with that guy.
And that's been really fun for me because I do enjoy history quite a bit. But now it's like, you want to keep up with him. You're like, oh, I want to go and read that book that he's been talking about. I want to be like Kuntz.
The Kuntzite cult is well underway.
I
for sure.
Yeah.
For Kuntzitism, you got to watch out for
it. But then the cool part about that mindset has also been that I'm recognizing that history isn't just about knowing dates and facts. It's about the wisdom of our ancestors. And that I have really appreciated as he brings history from many eras back into present day, like reading the signs of today through the history. I have greatly appreciated. So are we good with sound? Uh-oh.
Someone says it's low.
Okay.
I mean, I can't really turn it up much more than it is. And so I don't know. I mean, that I was whispering as I said that, so it should be louder now. But like, I don't know. I'm sorry, everybody. The world doesn't work. I was just saying upstairs, like, I don't want to do the show just because I'm afraid of what the sound issues are going to be.
Yeah.
So I got it on. I got it turned all the way up. I did turn that up on the distribution, so maybe that'll make a difference over there.
And you were going to have us go to Twitter for
absolutely, if you're ready. But I'm curious, like, again, what else you're getting? Are you getting anything specific out of Brief History of Power? What are you?
Well, like I said,
pulling from it. You've listened to the money episodes.
I've gone through a lot of the money episodes, and then I've gone way back. There was the Munster. Was that Munster one? Was that recent?
No, that was deep. That was early.
So yeah. And the fun part about the way my Overcast works, I have the Overcast app to play my podcasts and stuff. And so it just, like, if I have stuff downloaded, it'll just keep on going, and it's not in order. And it's typically, it goes backwards. Like, it won't, if I start it.
There's a setting.
Halfway. That's really good to know because I got, this week's, and then you work backwards. But
so
anyway,
what else are you getting?
So I've been getting, let me think. That's the tricky part about binging on things, is because it kind of starts getting really mixed together. I've pulled various things out about his view of fatherhood. I have really appreciated that. He has a high view of that calling and vocation, and it comes across in the way that he speaks of children. And so with the money episodes, like how we as parents or as fathers look at passing things on to our children and look at preparing them to continue once we're gone, or even get started while we're still here. That the way that he has phrased things has been eye-opening to me, as well as encouraging. I was talking to you about it a little bit last night, it was this morning. The way that he has phrased different things that I have been thinking about, but not had the courage to believe it's a good thought. Then he says that thought in words, and I'm like, oh, good, I can think this thought, and I can go forward with it. And so the boldness with which he assesses our current scenario through the lens of history is emboldening to the listener.
Well, and having the history on his side.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he comes with receipts, right? Like, he's going to give you real things from before now that then put now into context,
right?
Which is the whole point of A Brief History of Power, is to put the present moment into context as Christians, not being afraid to recognize Caesar's sometimes trying to kill you and call him out when he does, even as we try to, honor authority where it is. Giving permission to have ideas would be a major thing that I think he does for a lot of people. And so you don't, it's not that like you feel like your idea is wrong. It doesn't always have to be quite like that, but it's almost like it until he says it, and with the clarity he says it, it's like, oh, I'm allowed to think that? Oh, well, this is, I like thinking that.
Well, let's go forward then.
Yeah, right. He's done that a number of times for me with various things. And a little hat tip on what's coming down the pike. The next 2 episodes are going to deal with fatherhood a little bit more. Not directly, but as we're dealing with money again and world finance, what's called the managerial revolution.
Right. So I got the first
that
part
came out today or yesterday. That's right. That one came out Thursday.
I'm like,
yep.
Up to date. It's pretty exciting.
And the distinction between, well, there's one more episode after that one, but the distinction between manager and father.
Yes.
And that, once upon a time the world had fathers, and we're not just talking like in the house, but you would have the father of the city, the father of the church. Everyone saw authority as fatherhood, and now authority has become managerial, and the manager is generally more concerned with keeping something above and keeping the below and preserving himself in the middle somewhere.
Right, and there's an emotional
disconnect, right?
Between who he's managing or what he's managing. And so whereas with the father or the patriarch, you have more of an emotional investment. And that was an interesting insight to see.
My favorite out of it is that the father is one who sacrifices, and the manager is one who avoids sacrifice at all costs, basically, and that's a major distinction if you're going to look at like how your mayor is functioning. Is he going to put himself first and put everybody else first? And
we kind of saw this a little bit in some of our leadership recently. I know we
so Twitter's coming still here.
Somebody pretty authoritative put some pretty strict rules in place in Illinois, and then hightail it down to Florida
a couple times, and then some,
where things are quite open. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
But something he did mention was the use of propaganda in the American mindset, and how we might just want to take a step back for a hot 5 seconds with regards to the Ukraine-Russia episode here that we're dealing with.
Coming your way.
And not necessarily just say, one is bad or the other is good right away, just because that's the bent that we've been dished through our media sources.
Yeah.
So that gave
all
me
the same
pause.
media that has lied to us not only for 2 years about COVID issues, but for 5 years about the Russia collusion hoax, which is a proven hoax regarding Trump's connections with Russia. Okay, so for 5 years they've been lying to us about this, and now suddenly they're experts on Ukrainian Russian situations. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt governments in Europe. It was completely toppled as a government within the last 2 or 3 years by a U.S. intelligence-led coup that put the current administration in place, again, corrupt in terms of bringing in global financing in ways that are washing that money to send it out other places. And so whatever you might think about Russia, I'm not going to say, to quote our vice president, a bigger country invading a smaller country, that's bad. Like, yeah, kind of. I mean, there's people getting hurt. There's lots of people. There's buildings and neighborhoods and families and all this. And throughout Russia, there are people getting hurt by this as well. So there's all sorts of evil here, but to assume that now we just kind of have a good guy, bad guy, and the U.S. needs to be on the side of the good guy. And thankfully, at least in the media sources that I follow, there's been a lot of questioning about the narrative. Even as, like, for example, I follow Nikki Haley, who's a pretty well-known Republican governor. She was a governor. She was an ambassador. Man, she's just a war hawk right now. She said, rah, 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 I got to do it. And it's like, man, I'm about to unfollow you because the talking points of the World Economic Forum, if that's what this is. Your point again, the mainstream press into one story that we must join or we're bad. Right. That's very real. So let's use that as a hop over here to what I've found on the internet this week, thanks to the evil that is Twitter. And we already had one sound conversation here. If the sound gets destroyed by this moment, or if something else happens with regard to my ability to control Ecamm because I'm going to go to full screen something out of YouTube for half a moment, and this happened earlier, don't go away. We will do everything we can to reboot and come back to the same stream. If we don't come back to the same stream, look for another one because it'll still be here. But what you can see on the screen is just too small. That's why I'm going to have to blow it up. This is a combination of, I don't know if you can see the screen now or not.
If I turn my face, okay. I can look and see it. So once I go away, I can do that.
Yeah. I can come back and take you away. That's a good idea. Let's do that real fast. That'll just take a moment to do. Boop, boop, boo. And then back to here. So, this is a combination of infographics put together by the S2 Underground. I'm going to blow it up here in a moment so we can see it. S2 Underground is a YouTube channel that does military intelligence updates. These, I believe, are largely volunteers. I mean, I think they have a Patreon or something, but these are former military, retired military individuals who are keeping their eye on a number of things, and they made a plan at the start of the Ukrainian knowledge or story to provide the best up-to-date knowledge on the ground that they could for the sake of people living in Ukraine who wanted to get out of Ukraine. So this last video, War of Words, they've said is the last one that they're going to be focusing on Ukraine specifically. It's not the only thing they do, but these updates have been phenomenally accurate as opposed to other news that kind of comes and goes, and you find out, oh, this story about that, I mentioned the ghost of Kiev. I mean, that might have been all a myth, kind of thing. And so, or there was, just today, there was announced that Russia had, in fact, the Ukrainian government tweeted that Russia had bombed a nuclear facility, which was in violation of certain codes of war for international war. Turns out, no, they had taken the nuclear facility. There was a fire, but the fire was extinguished. And so, like, which news is which? Now, I mean, I'm not saying these guys fixed it for me, but every couple of days they've come out with a video and done a real good job of updating real-time information. Okay, so part of their most recent update includes this large infographic. I'm going to disappear for a second, and hopefully I can come back. But this is a bunch of information on what gaslighting is. Okay, so gaslighting is a psychological operation, a psyop, an intelligence-driven, military-learned psychological operation that is you try to use information to change people's minds, okay? And you do this by making them believe they are insane. It's connected and comes out of a movie called Gaslight, which is about a man who drives his wife insane by using these kind of operations. But to realize that that is what the mainstream media noise, the technocracy that we live in right now, has done over the last 2 years to us is very, very important. I'm just going to read this one on the right bottom right here where it says signs of gaslighting. I mean, all of them are good. You can go watch the video at STWN Underground and get the rest of them if you like. It says, gaslighting is a form of manipulation and abuse concentrated on making someone doubt reality. Right? So the goal is to make you doubt your reality so you become malleable and will do what the authority tells you to do. This involves blatant lying or constant cover-ups, denying conversations or events ever happened. So, for example, this week, there's been a big deal about how the Democrats have never said defund the police. Even though you can go find a video with a bunch of clips about the Democrats, Biden, Harris, saying defund the police, supporting that. But they deny the conversation ever happened. So that's the tactic. Manipulating others to see you differently. That is trying to change what your perception of you is. Your self-esteem slowly, this is you, the one being manipulated, slowly erodes away and you begin to question what is real. You start to think that you are bad or crazy. How many times have we said as conservatives in the last 2 years, this is crazy, it's crazy, everything's crazy. Right? You start to wonder if maybe it's you, especially if you're isolated and unable to talk to anybody else who thinks it's crazy, right? Actions contradict words. There's lots of broken promises. It feels like you have to defend your own reality, which is definitely the situation that we have been in. Oh, good. That's still going to work over there as we come back. So here's the thing is that we have to acknowledge that this is the media ecology that we live in now, is one that is gaslighting us. Why? To what end? I did listen to a phenomenal interview with Joe Rogan, and not everyone likes Rogan, and I don't like Rogan all the time myself, but he interviewed, I'm going to get his last name right, Nawaz. He's a former Islamic jihadist who has turned into free speech advocate. And I can't say I agree with everything he said, but a fantastic 3-hour interview about how certain players internationally, technologically, and government-wise are connected to much of what has gone on. A very important group called the SAGE Group, which is out of the British government and connected to British military. Members coming out in the last 2 weeks apologizing for gaslighting, psyoping the public. They're actually saying they did it and that they're wrong, right? And they were wrong for doing it. But not everyone has come out and said it yet. And certainly you still have moms masking their kids and screaming at people in places about this because they've been so manipulated. So let's just then take a step here back and remember that Thomas Jefferson said, "Nothing can now be believed which is seen in the newspaper. Truth itself becomes suspicious by being put into that polluted vehicle. The real extent of this state of misinformation is known only to those who are in situations to confront facts within their knowledge with the lies of the day." So nothing new under the sun, I believe, is the way Solomon said it. So let's remember that the media as a tool for providing information has always been a manipulation device. Always been a manipulation. Talking is a manipulation device unless you are a person of integrity. And as a Christian, why would you ever believe that all of the non-Christians making money for their life they're living just now are going to have the integrity to not lie? Why would you ever believe that, right? The inclination of man's heart is evil from youth, Genesis says, right? And that goes for Christians too. It's not like we're all perfect and chimey and good all the time. So how much more then those who have no integrity are they going to use these powerful tools to try to get what they want? And one of the things Watts said in the interview, which was really important, he says, I don't care about their motives. Like, so this SAGE group, this military, private operations, psychological operations group with people connected to this government organization that is using manipulative warfare, information warfare techniques in order to combat COVID. Like, does it matter if they thought it was good or bad? I mean, does it matter that they thought they were doing good? Does their intention matter? That they meant to help people? Does it matter when they lied to you, they manipulated you, they harmed you? At the end, what matters is what happened, right? How do we treat I'm talking to Meredith, she's not on the screen. How do we treat our kids? When your kid says something to the table, I mean, I'll come back to you for this one. When you've been there with me, other parents, if you haven't been there or haven't pointed it out, you got to point it out when the kid's like, well, I didn't mean to. Mm-hmm. Like, you just hit your sister. Well, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, it's one of those signs of original sin in children. And it's like, yeah, that's understood. So we've had to walk through this several times because it's just not cognitively there for them.
Right.
Even though you didn't mean to do something, it was still done. And so therefore you're still responsible for apologizing.
At the very least, for repenting of having done it and not doing it again, which is where I don't have this. I'll do this first. I don't have this tweet, but Robert Malone and Peter McCullough, two doctors who've been at the front lines of bringing information about this out over the last couple of years. They are connected to others who I believe are going to be bringing legal suit on a bunch of things. And they basically said, right now, you can either go to jail or be a witness. Like, if you come forward and you say, whistle blow, like it's early enough that they can get out, which again is why people in SAGE are beginning to whistleblow, right? It's because they don't want to be the last one standing and saying we didn't do it when you did, which again shows you the lack of integrity in the system, right? That, you're gonna serve your own generally is the way people go about it. So, all right. So moving forward here, what we found on Twitter. Okay, so more here. I want you to watch this one, Meredith. I want you to see this. This is about why you should not trust the internet, okay? So we're going to see a little video here of this kid, and he's crawling right along the edge of a waterfall. Look, he almost fell. It's just terrifying to watch this here. But you got to keep watching all the way to the end of this video, because what they're going to show you is that that's not what happened. He's actually just walking on a street. And there's a bar there, but you can use some video editing techniques to cut out and replace at a completely different reality. And that's how good what is called deep fake, when you do it in pornography, that's how good deep faking has gotten on all levels. So forget using that phraseology for pornography. It's a way to lie with the camera. Don't believe it just because you saw it, just because you think they said it, especially when it's coming from the mainstream sources right now. Well, mainstream sources. Here we go. Breaking news a couple of days ago or yesterday. Today. United States Senate votes to repeal Joe Biden's healthcare vaccine mandate. The Senate voted to repeal the executive order mandating that all healthcare workers get the vaccine. Vote was 49 to 44.
That's good news.
Not one Democrat voted in favor of repealing the mandate, even though on the same day, there was a data dump, major data dump. Pfizer data dumped 55,000 pages of documents about the vaccine trials, including a 38-page report featuring in the appendix a list of adverse events and special interest, 1,291 different adverse events in their trial. Okay. The list includes acute kidney injury, acute flaccid myelitis, anti-sperm antibody positive, brainstem embolism, brainstem thrombosis, cardiac arrest, cardiac failure, the list is going to go on. I'm not going to read the whole list. You can see it on the page. So this is getting dropped Friday afternoon. News cycle's done for the weekend, right? So watch that one come out. And then here's some notes from that as well. Notes from Pfizer's recently released docs that 4 people died on the same day they were vaxxed after anaphylaxis. Of the 270 pregnant mothers vaxxed, 27 babies were lost. That's an even 10%. And if that's not bad enough, a Swedish study, we may have mentioned this last week, but it's continuing to make the rounds. A Swedish study has confirmed that the Pfizer COVID vaccine does convert to DNA inside your body, something they said it would not do, and it does this, I believe, in your liver cells. So there is more information about the potential long-term dangers of the inoculations that are coming out as science, right? Of course, this is misinformation, right? YouTube, as science. So, if you did get them, God be with you. And if you didn't get them, God be with you. And the point is, stop trusting this stuff, okay? Stop listening to these people. They do not have your best interests in mind at this point. And this has been a 2-year course in that. So if you're still listening to them and, masking your kids intentionally, you got a problem. So there's a picture of Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, not because he's the governor of Florida, but because Florida legislature has just passed a bill banning abortion after 15 weeks. This is not all the way, but it's a step in the right direction, and he's going to sign this when it gets to his desk. So good on Florida following Texas in that pro-life move recently. Governor DeSantis was also caught in the news. There's a little bit of a rile-up about this here. I love this, actually. So there's going to be a video. I'm going to play this. You can get the audio of it, of him. He's about to speak at, I believe it's Texas, not Texas, Florida, Tallahassee University. He's at a university. He's walking in to speak. The university has set up a whole line of students wearing masks behind him. No one's wearing masks in Florida. Like, they're not wearing masks, but there's a whole bunch of students wearing masks behind him. Okay, this is a stunt. And what he's going to do?
To wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine. But this is ridiculous.
Can they hear it?
Yeah, you know what?
I heard him say this is
yeah.
ridiculous.
They should have it. It might have been a bit low there, but it was showing on the screen what he said. He says this is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. You can wear it if you want to, but you don't have to wear it. I mean, really should take them off. We got to stop with the COVID theater. He says. Now the best part of COVID theater is, guess what? One of the kids' moms comes on the TV station and starts complaining about how he doesn't have the right to tell her son to take a mask off. Now just look at the picture though.
Yeah.
Where's hers? Where's hers? Where's hers? Why? What? Wait, what? Where's hers? She's what? So yeah, gaslight. Oh, wasn't this fun? Now maybe he just misspoke. It was the State of the Union. Did you watch? Probably not. Very few people did, and it was like the lowest rated State of the Union in 30 years. Yeah? I mean, he talks a little more like this.
Well, I remember watching the State of the Union.
Excuse me. I was not finished. And you're not on the screen. Let me get you on the screen. Go ahead.
I remember watching the State of the Union address with Trump and our kids, and there were times when we were like in tears. He was talking about people being let out
He was
of prison.
Bringing out people, and it was a big old show.
Right?
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't even know this one was happening.
Well,
but
even their side wasn't exactly playing it up that loud because.
Right. Well, I'm curious to know. I almost wonder if I should, just for the kids' sake, like have a moment of like, okay, well, let's just watch a little bit of this, because remember when we watched another one? Yeah. And how it was.
I don't know. I don't know if this one was worth it. I'm going to show you the two bloopers. Well, there's three. I'm going to show you two of the three bloopers because it's just kind of funny. At the end of the day, you have to recognize how bad it is. But in terms of like the real substance. So for example, I mean, this president within 1 year has withdrawn all American troops from Afghanistan, leaving behind American citizens and having at least 13 soldiers die in what is clearly a catastrophic military failure. And it wasn't mentioned. Soldiers' families aren't recognized, anything like that. The kind of thing that presidents do, not just Donald Trump, presidents recognize soldiers who die in battle in a year, right? I mean, that this is what you do. And it was just all smushed aside and everything's great and everything's fine. But, except Ukraine. And so, here's the piece I'm going to play for you of President Biden letting us know about how the Iranian people live in Ukraine.
We stand with you. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their
They
love
clap.
of
They
freedom.
clap. One of my, they don't have it here. I don't have it here, but I saw one video where they close up on Kamala, who's sitting behind him. VP is always right behind him, and they close up on her, and she's going like this as he talks, and then he says that word. He says Iranian, and she goes. Her lips just kind of move a little bit, like, what was that? What was that there? Now, maybe he said Uranian instead of Ukrainian. That was what at least one news source tried to say. But this is where, again, we have a man in this office who respect the office. I would respect the office by asking the man to resign. If I was him, I would want to. I would recognize that my cognitive faculties, I mean, as a pastor, when my cognitive faculties are like this, I should not be preaching anymore in any kind of full-time capacity where people's lives depend on it, right? Because you've lost capacity. Speaking of losing capacity, this has got to be the best part of the entire thing. Everyone knows who Nancy Pelosi is, right? She's this Speaker of the House, Congresswoman from California, a liar, a thief, and a bunch of other things. But can you see this one? This is great. So he's going to say something. She thinks she's going to clap. Just watch. Oh. What was that about? That has got to be the weirdest moment in U.S. political history. It's just rubbing them together. It's just really, really bizarre. Okay, I'm going to get serious again here for a second. So Texas has passed that law making it illegal to operate on young children as a transgender kind of thing. And so, of course, Kate Brown of Oregon. I'm not sure what she does in Oregon government. She's in Oregon government. She has come out making sure that all those kids know they can move to Oregon, where they will be given grooming for their future. She didn't use the word grooming, but that's what it means. And this is a fun one. This is like the one with the date from 2 weeks ago. So you got this kid sitting here, overweight guy, drinking his McDonald's, got his Pornhub shirt on. Religion, that's man-made institutions to control us. Right, as he continues to subject himself to the gods of this age. So there we go. That's our week on the world that we didn't need to see, but now we did. And Lord have mercy. Yeah, Lord have mercy and all of
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. So we got some questions from you, Bible's Answers. Some of our nonsense still coming your way. Is there anything else you brought to the table this week for us to talk about before we get into that, though? We only got 2 hours tonight, so an hour and a half left. Stop the White Nose with Jonathan and Meridith. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Meredith.
And we're glad you're here with us as we go forward. Lots of comments, by the way, tonight. Chat room at night's a little more active.
Yeah. I think starting in on the questions is a good idea, and then that gives us more time to chat about them or after them. So
I'm going to block you out just for a second with this first question, but you'll be back, and we can see your hands stirring your lovely little keto drink. Lori writes in and she says this is not a question necessarily for the Saturday show. That's why we're taking it Friday night. Come on now. This is a great question for the Saturday show. I'm wondering if you can please recommend a version of the Catechism that is family friendly for all ages. We would also love a recommendation for a hymnal version used for singing at home. Excuse me. I got my stevia drink giving me a little pop and soda burpees. So here, I know you will have like the best for the kids recommendations here. My trick is, I think the question is misguided, right? You're not going to have a catechism that's for all ages. Not in the sense of what you're looking for, if it's not just the catechism. And in that regard, the Catechism, I refer to the Ten Commandments, the Creed, the Lord's Prayer as the things that we should know and say every day, because they are essential to our faith and life in our Lord Jesus Christ. So that is why it is a catechism. It is to be repeated, it is to be echoed, it is to be part of the words that run your life. And that is for all ages. Luther's explanation to the Small Catechism, what most Lutherans think of as the Catechism, but it's Luther's explanation to the Small Catechism, is written for fathers. It's not written for kids. Why we make 7th graders memorize it, we can debate that. It's good poetry. I agree. It's great poetry. How many 7th graders are dying to memorize poetry these days? Why we do that is an old habit, and we do it. It's not written for that. It's written for fathers to teach their kids with. So the father's going to learn it and then talk to his kid afterward. That's what that's for, right? Follow and Do Catechism is a great little kids catechism book,
sure.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, it takes a lot of Luther stuff and it puts it in a picture book, and you can kind of, my first catechism from CPH, Concordia Publishing House, not my favorite. It's fine.
Yeah, there's really nothing wrong with it. It has been given to many of our children, and we've worn through a few copies of it. So
it's great as a picture book.
Yes, it's really good because part of the catechism is repetition. And so to have a picture that illustrates goes well with how children learn when they don't know what words are yet.
Right. And they wore through it because they're just looking at the pictures of the Bible stories a lot of the time, right? So it's kind of like a Bible story picture book.
Yeah, and they're realistic pictures. So Jesus doesn't have a big old honking nose, and it's very realistic and respectful. So that's what I like about that one.
My issue with that one is that it commingles law and gospel in a way that modern Lutherans are wont to do. And I haven't gone page by page through all of it. I just know it does it on the first page.
Right.
And the way it does it is this. It begins talking about the law and the Ten Commandments. And it tells you that the law and the Ten Commandments are given to God through Moses. You get that part. And then it tells you that the Ten Commandments show you your sin. And then it tells you that Jesus died so you don't have to worry about that. Which is kind of not the point of the Ten Commandments. Like, I get it that the Ten Commandments show us our sin and then Jesus died to save us from our sins. That's absolutely true. But if I'm just trying to teach you the Ten Commandments and I have to shove the gospel into the law every time I speak the law, otherwise you might not believe the gospel, I'm commingling law and gospel. Right. So that's my issue with that one. So beware of it a little bit. Bible Stories for Daily Prayer, Catechism Edition.
Yeah, I was
going
to suggest the way that I don't know if Bender put this part together or not.
All of it's from a guy named Fabricius.
He has a great way of leading parents, and I don't remember what portion of his curriculum does this, but it will lay out, like, for the preschooler, read this portion only. For the elementary school child, move on to this portion. And so it slowly ups the ante as the child gets older and kind of shows you what you can expect from the typical child in your child's age group.
Yeah, right. So Bible Stories for Daily Prayer from Concordia Catechetical Academy, run out of Peace Lutheran Church in Sussex, Wisconsin, and you can follow that Google thought.
There's something that they put out for just churches to print in their bulletins, and I don't.
They don't put that out. They put it together for their church, and then we have someone at our church who goes and pulls pieces out of it and reformats it into our thing every week. Yeah, right. Which is really cool, but it is a bit of work. The Congregation at Prayer, I believe, is what that's called. Yeah. Which is like a nice take home this week. Here's some Bible and catechism to ponder. But I'm even watching in the comments here again. I cannot emphasize it enough. Catechism is not what Luther wrote. I mean, his large catechism is a meditation on the catechism. But what he wrote was his own words. That is not the catechism. The catechism is the Ten Commandments, not a commentary on it. Just them. The creed, not a commentary. Just it. And the Lord's Prayer. And that if you're not, no matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, that should be part of your daily bread. Right? Those things are to be said out loud every day. They are the essence of our faith. And that's why the word catechism exists. And we get so caught up in all the other pieces, which are good, but we get caught up as if they are equivalent to the Word of God, which the catechism is. Creed, Lord's Prayer, Ten Commandments are effectively the Word of God. Luther's commentary is a confession of faith. It's a wonderful confession of faith, but it is not the Scriptures, right? And so that's where I can't emphasize that enough. And no matter how much I do, it's still... we want to talk about the other one as if it is.
Sing the Faith is also helpful if you are a musical family.
Is that the
That's the
CD?
one that's the one that Magnus put out. And I know it's gotten a lot of flack for the way it was put together.
It was recorded.
But
can I talk about why?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Because when you take one child's voice and use a computer to multiply it into 50 children's voices, it sounds like demons singing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not my favorite
There might have been 3
go-to.
kids.
Like, hey, let's have meditative time in the car listening to this. But honestly, like the kids, what is baptism?
They
like,
know
they
it. Yep, they'll
and
go.
they just,
Yep, this is the truth. It's the
start
truth.
singing
The
it.
songs are
So,
fine. The songs are not the issue. It could use a little. Oh no, I'm losing. What did Lindsey Sterling do? There's a style of music that like puts in the like a wah 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 wah, you know, and like to put that in behind it would be really cool. I think. Yeah.
with the demon child.
Yeah. Well, no. You're gonna redo it. You're gonna reboot.
Reboot it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a helpful, but I like your emphasis.
You're not even on the screen.
I noticed that, but I thought, hey, I'll just
Talk from behind a square.
be like this voice out of nowhere. I do like your emphasis on the fact that it's not as hard as we want it to be. Kind of like Christianity, like it's really not that hard. But just doing it is probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
I mean, saying the Lord's Prayer every day is really tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the creed.
Unless it's a habit and there's a time when you do it, right?
And so, honestly, like if your child is washing dishes with you, you can sing the ABCs, you can say the Apostles' Creed, you can say the Lord's Prayer. I mean, you can ask him about their day. There's multiple things you can do at the kitchen sink. Same goes for folding laundry. Like we all have to do it, or sorting laundry. And so if you just ask your little helpers to be around you or doing that task around them and then saying these things while you're doing it, they will hear it and they will absorb it like little sponges, because that's kind of the cool part about how kids' brains are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, again, the simplicity of the 10 Commandments, the Creed, and the Lord's Prayer. It's not this massive thing you have it memorized. You have it memorized. You should. You go to church, you got 2 of them every week. You better have those 2 memorized. And the 10 Commandments, not that tough. You know, give it a week. You can do it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that, again, Luther's Small Catechism, his explanation of it, is a bad thing. It's a very wonderful thing. And I think fathers ought to attend to it with some focus until they understand the meanings of the 10 Commandments, the Creed, and the Lord's Prayer, so that they can talk about these things, or so that, you know, you think with that. You think with that theology. And similarly, My First Catechism and the Concordia Catechetical one, the real value that those books bring is they're like, oh, the second commandment. Well, let's do the first commandment. Oh, the first commandment. Here's a story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were asked to worship a false god. Commandment says, shall have no other gods. They didn't do. Look at that. It happened, right? And so these Bible stories, though, aside from the connection point to the Catechism, which is nice, that's just life in the Word of God, right? And so to be able to like, oh, okay, tonight this is the story. Like you don't even have to read what the thing says. Like go read the story.
Yeah.
And if you don't make the perfect Catechism connection, I'm pretty sure the Word of God's going to function in your life, right? And so again, we overcomplicate this thing, like we engineer it into the ground. I don't know, but are there other resources that are good ones that you can think of?
To address the hymnal question, honestly, I've tried the My First Hymnal, and
Is that that board book?
No, it has an angel on the front. It's put out by CPH. It's like an orange cover, and
Isn't that like it just talks about, I'm thinking of the Christmas one maybe.
Yeah, you're thinking of the one that goes through the liturgy maybe?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I mean, that's really helpful. That was a good book, and I don't know what that one's called off the top of my head.
With Angels and Archangels.
Yeah, there you go. But honestly, the hymnal, because they come to church and they see it, and you are using it at church, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes to them more of a sacred, special book than you'll even realize.
Yeah. One of the best things about worship at St. Paul is seeing these like 2 and 3-year-olds who can't read holding their hymnals.
They want to do it
Just
like the
stand in
adults.
there. It's great.
Yeah. And then what helped me with our children was focusing in on the liturgy that we sang during Sunday service. So they could participate without having to read. So like our oldest child, her favorite was the heart song. And it's when the pastor stands up and says, "We lift up our hearts unto the no, the congregation says that part, right?
I say lift up your hearts. You say we lift them up to the Lord.
We lift them up to the Lord. Yeah. And so so she would just, let's sing the heart song. Which one's that?
That's right.
But anyway, having the liturgy or building a familiarity with what they are going to interact with on Sunday is super important. And having it be something that comes into the comfort of home makes it part of who your family is, and not just this foreign thing that you go somewhere else to do. So once you start doing whatever is in the hymnal at home, it becomes, it gives you identity as a family. So
yeah, you could argue that the hymnal holds you together more than any other book as a congregation or as a church body. Not to diminish the Bible, but like you can shift your translation, and shifting your hymnals harder. It really is. And especially because it becomes such a part of your life just on Sundays. So then bring that home and make it part of your life throughout the week. So I'm going to kind of tell a story about, again, St. Paul, young family and their firstborn. He's a little older now, but he was kind of playing with the hymnal in church, and I don't remember if he ripped a page or not, but they were worried about that. And I was like, it's his. Let him do whatever he wants. He can rip every page out. I don't care. We'll get him another one. And he didn't. I mean, he took it home and he loved it. They bring it back. And I think there's a few ripped pages and some pencil marks in it. But the point is, again, he feels like it's part of his life. And now now is he 4 now? I don't know. He's definitely trying to make use of it more. And,
close to 3, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're never too young for the actual hymnal. There is, I mean, you have some resources like they have a pocket hymnal, which is the same one, but it's got no music written in it. You can carry it around. It's kind of a nice tool. It could be better, in terms of like, I end up, how do I make that judgment? I don't use it. Like I bought it. If it's in my pocket, I don't carry it. Why? I don't know. It doesn't feel right in my hand. And that's sort of well, and you're also very musical. And so maybe seeing the notes is kind of a comfort for you coming from a musical upbringing. Speaking of the guitar edition for Lutheran Service Book is pretty good, even if you don't play guitar and you just play a little keyboard, because it's got the tablature, so you can just kind of pluck it around and you don't actually have to be able to play every note the way you're supposed to. And that's become one of my favorite things in our family recently is singing with the guitar around the dinner table afterwards. And, it's all them and their hymns. Yeah. These are the Holy 10 Commands. And what's the Trinity one? I can't think of it now. It's really hard. And it's like a Luther one.
The one that goes
you wouldn't think it would be good with guitar, but it's super good with guitar.
No.
We all believe in one true God. That's got such great chords. It's got such great chords. Jam that one. Anyhow, so
that's fun times.
Other hymnals. I mean, TLH, the Lutheran hymnal is a good hymnal. It's 1941. It's fine. Some people swear by it, and that you have to have it or you're not a Lutheran. That's kind of what I don't like about it. So LSB is a very decent hymnal. Lutheran Worship, the blue one, ain't bad. I mean, what do you got? What does your church use?
Yeah.
Use what your church uses. Be where I'd be at that one. Yeah. We're good?
Yeah.
On that one? All right, moving on. All right. Marlo says this. Thanks for writing in, Marlo. Reverend Mrs. Fisk, how would you define a congregational membership, especially in the COVID era when a whole mass of people aren't coming back? I recognize that it is a sign of our times and that those who didn't actually care are just demonstrating that more clearly, but should we still be counting them as members and operating our congregation with those numbers? Excuse me. This is why I don't drink soda pop while I do shows. Apparently I get a little burpy. She goes on, how many delinquent member calls do you think a pastor should do? Are you talking about weekly? What do you think about a team like the Evangelism Committee, where applicable, helping or completely taking on the task of delinquent member outreach? And at what point would you say to a member, you have expressed by a lack of communication and attendance that you are not in fellowship with us, therefore we are releasing you from membership? This is not administratively the same as communication, although I think it should be, but it cleans up the numbers and sends a clear message. I recognize this is like 3 or 4 questions, but I appreciate any and all thought and answer you give to them. Thank you so much for your work, and thank you also for demonstrating your marriage teamwork on camera. You are both great examples and encouragements. Jesus bless you. Thank you, Marlo. Jesus bless you as well.
Amen.
All right, it is several questions, and at least on the first one about defining congregational membership, I definitely want to look at a little bit of Bible about what a church is. But my starting point here is there's 2 things I want to address. One is the issue of what COVID did to churches, and those churches that are finding that when you shut down, people don't just come back. So that's a real problem. Yeah. But then 2, wow, are we over concerned with numbers? Way too much. And there was a place in history where it really made sense that you needed to know everybody and their name and their number and keep track of everything about them. And then if they were not going to come anymore, you wanted to go make sure they were still coming. I'm not sure that makes sense anymore. I'm not sure it ever quite did, except for that we lived in a time where the institutional reality of the church was so expected to go on forever that we could really think of the church as a thing that had tracked membership, as opposed to the church being people who are gathering around the word and sacraments of Jesus in this place. That's the definition of the church. And so this idea that we're going to have these lists of roles of people that are in or they're out, and we're going to have a perfect knowledge of them at all times, it's a very elitely modern idea. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we don't want to go follow people who are drifting away if we know that they're drifting away and say, hey, how are you? Like that. I'm not saying don't do that. So that, you've got those questions in here too. But the one time in the Bible that David takes a census isn't a good thing, right? He's too concerned with numbers. That's my point. Okay. And so, rather than be worried about how we're tracking all the people that are members and how we define what membership is, which is really a matter of your constitution, which is really a matter of man-made orders. How about we just be concerned with the people who we know once upon a time feasted on the body and blood of Jesus? Who are they? Where are they? Don't nobody knows each other? You need the pastor to have a list? That's the only way? That tells a lot more, I think, right? And then the question becomes is it the pastor's job to go and track them all down? Now, that isn't to say that the pastor doesn't want to know his care of souls and that the souls that are under his shepherding, he wants to care for. But where's this idea that we pay him to do that? Really? That's all you, it's just you and him, right? And everybody else just kind of whatever. But if you leave and don't tell anybody for 4 weeks, he better show up with a phone call. Otherwise he doesn't love you and nobody else does either. Right? So do you see my concern? I mean, you can take any single thing I just said there and turn it into something really bad. But what I would rather have you try to hear is the spirit of what I'm getting at. It's the angle you're going at this can be a lot less burdensome to you when it becomes a matter of grieving for the wicked who are being shed from the church and the culling that God is doing to the church right now. When you don't think it's up to you to stop the culling, when you nonetheless pray for all people, right? And those who you know, your neighbors, seek to find them. The idea that you need a committee to go find your people, that's really weird. Again, that's just really weird. Why did no one notice they were gone? Well, because no one had talked to them before. So why was no one talking to them? Are you talking to each other now, the ones you've got? Do you know each other now? That seems more important than finding the one who doesn't want to be there. They're not here for a reason. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go chase. But again, you go chase and bring them back to what? A group that doesn't know each other and expects the pastor just go and herd everybody into the club every week so we can have enough money to make the bills? You see what I'm saying? So all of these are institutional, not all of these, a lot of this is an institutional problem. It's about the social clubs that we have set up on the foundation of Christendom. Christendom is collapsing and the social clubs are kind of having trouble. COVID was like, punch you in the face, social clubs. And so now what do you do on the other side of that? Now, Lord have mercy. Not all congregations are struggling through COVID in the same way. And what I have observed is the more that you shut down, the more you let the world dictate to you what the path of the church would be. That is, Jesus said, as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup until I return, you proclaim my death. And you said, that's okay. We won't worry about that for 2 years. I heard about that one east of here, hour and a half, first service in 2 years on Sunday.
Oh,
yeah, LCMS.
wow.
If you don't have people coming back, I don't think it matters how much you go knock on their doors, right? And that's kind of the thing. Like, you've already starved them to death. And congregations that made every effort possible to keep it going. And there were people doing like mass and drive-by, right? Well, that was better than shutting down. I'm not saying that's what we did or what I would advise, but that was better than shutting down. And we're just going to go online for 2 years. You don't confess a belief in the sacrament if you do that. I'm not saying you don't in your head, theologically, philosophically believe it. I'm saying your actions are not showing that you believe it. Right? And so churches that are in a situation where that happened, my advice to you would be, again, before you start trying to chase down the herd that's been culled through their own disbelief, okay, make sure you recenter the ones that are there around the thing that matters. Bring them back to something worth bringing them back to rather than assume you've got it already. Now, I'm not saying, you guys are Christians. I'm sure you are, right? But it is Lent. This is a time for repentance, not for assuming that we can fix it, right? So I got more, but that's the big one for me in all the list of questions. And so I'm curious, what do you have thoughts on this? I don't know if it's not your expertise exactly, but at least respond to what I said a little bit.
What you've been talking about makes me think about boundaries and how hard that is to put into practice. So allowing, as a mother, I talk to my kids about this often, I find. Allowing other people to respond or make decisions is something that is very challenging for us. We want to say something to them and have them respond a certain way. Mm-hmm. And we cannot control them. And so accepting that, like you said, there's a culling that's going on. It's going to happen, and the group that remains will be stronger for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Lord willing, those who leave for a time will then return. But we don't change what we've talked about this as well in just our own personal conversation. We don't change what we're doing just because somebody doesn't like it. We don't suddenly go and not deny is not the word, but it's turn away from what has been handed down over the years for generations just because suddenly someone is offended by it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we had talked about itching ears several times at church too.
Right. And this is not to say that people who have stayed away have all done it for, there's such a thing as a shut-in. Right. It does happen. The concern I have, again, is that there's this idea that either I, the pastor, or we, the church leadership, we're going to go to a bunch of people who have decided they don't want to come to church anymore. And we're going to find a way to get them to come to church again, and that will be church then. And there's a little too much of us in that reality, right? So I don't know. This is maybe not the best proof text, but it for my pastoral ministry side of things, this says a lot, okay? And you can judge me on that if you want. There are two major images of pastors in the Old Testament. There's a whole bunch of them, but there's two major ones because all the kings of Israel are called shepherds of Israel. So to be a pastor is to be a king, to reign with words, not with a sword. But the shepherds of Israel reigned with both. There are two major ones that are parallel to each other and against each other, Saul and David. Long story, right? Each of them have some pretty key moments. They're confronted by prophets and respond differently. One repents, one doesn't, right? That's important. But way, way back, you find them initially doing two different things. One of them's herding sheep, and one of them's chasing goats. Lost goats that he never finds. Now, forgive me for running that through the sheep and the goats parable, but I do. And it's something I've asked myself at various times in ministries. Okay, like I get it that the parable of the lost sheep, go find the one lost sheep. That parable is about how Christ came to save sinners, not the righteous. It's not about how pastoral care means leave behind the people who you need to feed and don't feed them while you give all your attention to those who don't want the food. And so as a pastor, particularly, you have a very set amount of time. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to burn it in anxiety, chasing people who don't want to come to church? Or are you going to make sure you found and build up with all that you got the discipleship of those people who are coming to church? Now, it's not to say if you got a shut-in list or not shut-in. If you got an inactive list, what did she call them? They call them delinquents. You had a interesting, delinquent member. Like, how do we even have a delinquent member? Like, you're a delinquent disciple. Like it already says the problem, right? Now, inactive would be what we would say around here, but it's the same problem. Okay, inactive member. Do you have any inactive members in your body? Right. I mean, if that's a problem, they cut it off usually, right? Usually. So it's a very strange concept, and so your question's a good one. That's why I want to get to a little Bible. It doesn't mean that if you've got that list of names of people who used to come to your church, like, what is that? What do you do with that? I think it is a mistake to think of that list as a membership list. That is what it usually is in the Constitution. And that's I think, a relic of the Constitutions, the way they've been set up as social clubs with voting memberships, right? Because really what that is a voting membership more than a communicant membership, and we've mushed the two into the same thing, so they're not communing, but they can still come and vote when they want to, right? So there's a problem there. But Pastor Heath Curtis, said at one point, it's like, well, look, you got a mailing list. You have a mailing list of people who still want to know what's going on at your church. Send them good stuff. And if they don't want it, they don't want it, right? But then, again, to think that the primary goal is to make that list reflect what your worship is. What you want is your attendance. You know, who's attending? You want to know who they are. Mm-hmm. You want to keep them attending if you can. Because again, if they drift a little bit, grabbing them right away will probably pull them back. Whereas if they've been on this list for 15 years, I mean, yeah, they might appreciate a phone call. But again, I got a piece from Luther, and I can't quote where this is. I remember reading it, where he's kind of going off in a letter about how, what are we supposed to do? Like, set up a pulpit at everybody's bedside so that we can preach to them when they want to hear it? Like, there's not enough time in the week for this. And that was back in the 1500s, right? So concern yourself less with the managed human lists and concern yourself more with who people are and what they know. If you've got a mailing list, send out as much information as you can. Send invites to church every Easter. Try to use that as a propaganda list. But you have to build your core of people that you actually know and who know each other. Otherwise, all you're doing is a pyramid scheme. It's a scam. And we don't want to be in that business. We want people to come for the teaching of the scriptures, for what the word of God actually says. And so then here, I'll just confess my own, again, weaknesses here as a pastor. I've got great support here, where I've got an associate pastor who's very personal, and an older gentleman. He can make people feel welcome, and he'll go and visit our shut-ins, and does things that he gets such joy out of it too. And I am not a people person. I'm a teacher. I love teaching. I could teach till the end of the day. So we work together to reach as many as we can on a church that used to have 1,400 people in it, right? And I got here and there's 120 in attendance, right? So we didn't kick people off the list. We started a new list in terms of what we know we had. And then we do our best to maintain that. Every once in a while we find someone who says, I'm a member, and like, you're not on our list. Okay, well, that's great. But the list doesn't matter is the point, right? What matters is, okay, now we know who you are. We know you believe that this is your altar. And so we are going to do our best to shepherd you, recognizing that what this altar is about is the teaching of the scripture. And so if you come here and don't want to come back, I mean, this isn't about members now, but shifting here to visitors. We've had a number of visitors here recently, and I've been asking the question, and it was even brought up recently in a meeting, like, shouldn't we be getting their information and going and visiting them and knocking on their doors and all this stuff? And like, I get that. Like, and I can see how that would work to get them back. The question is, then what they're there for isn't what we're here for. What we're here for is word and sacrament, and they're coming back for friendliness. Does that mean we're not friendly? I think we're friendly. But do you have to like go and coddle and cordial and herd the goats into the building? And then what do you got? Do you actually have sheep or goats? I mean, I don't know. So again, all of your questions are in this kind of sphere, right? Took a lot of time on that. And I got Bible to go, but it looks like you wanted to say something.
Well, I like the idea that you kind of alluded to of putting it in the hands of the congregation rather than the responsibility of the pastor or the elders. If you have a ladies group that wants something to do, then sending notes and making phone calls is something that delights people. Elderly women, for example, who they just have energy that they want to serve the church with, and they just don't know how.
You know, I found that they don't want to do this one though.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
Oh, and so here's another phone. You made me think of it. It's like, so why does this all have to be like private? So the pastor is supposed to know that you weren't here for 6 weeks, and then he's supposed to privately go and talk to you. Why don't we just publish your attendance every week? Like, this guy hasn't been here in 3 weeks. Anybody want to call him? Like, nobody would like that though. We'd all have a bunch of fits about that. Why?
I don't know. I mean, wouldn't you wonder if Cousin George never came to Thanksgiving? Everybody's gathering at Thanksgiving. Why isn't George
he
here?
Not here? Yeah.
Hey, does anybody want to call him and see if he's okay?
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah.
Does the father have to call Cousin George? No. Another cousin can call Cousin George.
Or grandpa.
Or,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So the point being, again, that the real goal is for us to know and care for each other, period.
Yeah.
And the more you administrate that through management, can I brief history of power this here? The more it becomes a matter of middle management, shepherding as management, the further away you are from pastoral care and or congregational support, right? Yeah.
A seminarian came to our home, during the summertime, and I was asking him, he had just finished up vicarage and he was going into his final year. Oh no, he had a deferred vicarage. Anyway, that's beside the point. Asking him like, okay, so after you've gone through vicarage, what's your take on pastoral ministry? And what would you say is maybe a weak spot or a strong spot? And he was like, you know what? Shut-in visiting. I did a ton of shut-in visiting, and all it is sitting there for maybe 30 to 45 minutes listening to a lonely person tell you their story, and then finally the last 10 minutes giving them why you came there, which is the Lord's Supper.
He was doing this on vicarage?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he went by himself.
Good.
Yeah. I would think that he didn't because of his theological bend.
Good.
But he said, it's interesting because, he might have been one of the just visitors. Like, I think the pastor would go.
Yeah.
As I remember, he mentioned the pastor would go with the Lord's Supper, and then he kind of did more of a social call. And he's like, why is the vicar doing this? Why can't the members of the congregation do this? Why can't we put the care of the congregation back in the hands of the congregation instead of making it something that's
but
only
it's
the pastor's
never going to
job.
happen through a managerial programmatic
No.
thing. It's going to happen because the members know each other and care about each other.
How fun is it to have your mother say, "Hey, did you call your sister yet? Have you talked to her in a week?"
No, that's not fun
That's
at all.
no fun. It's more fun to just think of it yourself and go do it. To know that, hey, as a family, we check in on each other, if not weekly, monthly.
So should we still be counting as members and operating our congregation with those numbers? I think those numbers don't matter. They're a story. They've always been a story. So stop worrying about them so much. You do have to figure out how you distinguish a voting member and what their requirements are. So the fact that most constitutions have no requirements for voting members, I think that's incredibly bizarre. Old constitutions, you had to come to voters' assemblies, and if you didn't for so long, you were off. And that didn't mean you couldn't commune. That would be a matter of pastoral care again. And are you known by the pastor? Does he know you, right? Or are you just some random? How many delinquent member calls do I think a pastor should do? I don't do any. I don't have very many delinquents, but then again, I had like 1,400 of them, right? What we do is the team that includes my elders, through conversation at which I'm kind of the hub, but it's not always like one conversation that we're all in, but I'm hubbing between others, is we all keep an eye on who we know belongs to us. And if anyone notices that anyone's missing, they say something to me. And generally, the person who notices is willing to go do something unless they're not, and then I find someone else who will, if not me, right? And usually that's a phone call. But I wouldn't call that a delinquent member, usually. Oftentimes, in fact, last Sunday, there were 2 names that were brought to me by one elder. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this person's there. Oh no, that person's, it's fine. Right? So like, but the point is our eye is on our people, right? As opposed to, I've got this list of unknowns who somehow my conscience has been tied to, I don't know by what, by whatever we've decided to believe the church is, that's not the church. That is by what. Now, look, if the evangelism committee wants to take that list of 1,400 names and all their email addresses and or all their addresses and start mailing them stuff and making phone calls, there's no problem with that. It's this idea again that somehow the path of church is to manipulate the unhappy into being happy, right? Or to bring those who are unrepentant and lukewarm back into it through some sort of finagling. Now, James is pretty clear, right? Like a person who restores a brother, he covers a multitude of sins. So it's not like you can't, but then who's the brother? You have to know who this person is, right? Evangelism committees, I got problems with committees to begin with. Evangelism is something you do when you believe in Jesus. So you believe in Jesus, so you talk about Jesus. And as you talk about Jesus with people who believe in Jesus, eventually you talk about Jesus with people who don't believe in Jesus. It just happens. And a committee is people who sit around and have a good idea and then say why it's a bad idea and then don't do it until there is eventually a mediocre idea that they all kind of are willing to do and it gets done poorly. That's what a committee is. Forgive me, but I do really think that. At what point do you say to your member, you've expressed your lack of communication? Yeah. Well, look, they're not coming. So what's the problem? Is the problem that they're going to show up on Easter and you have to commune them on Easter? I mean, closed communion is an issue there. That's the time to have a nice conversation. Where you been? You want to commune now? Do you have some sins to confess? Normally we absolve. I'll forgive you before you come up. But how you doing? Right. So there's a place for that. Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about church a little bit here though, and try to move through this fairly quickly. But we're on head coverings. Yeah. Matthew chapter 16. Oh, I thought I had it highlighted. Where'd it go? Church. There it is. So the word church, how do the question's about membership, right? What is membership in the church? And to talk about that, you've really got to figure out what the word church is. And the word church is not a good word. In English, it's a complete mess up. It's like one of the worst words in translation that we've got. And it's because it doesn't in any way convey what the original language conveys. And then because its root is a different word that is normally translated the way that it should be. That is, the root of the word is call. To call, like to shout for someone, phone call, right? No phones, but that's the root of the word. Now, how much can you hear the word call in the word church? Like it's just not even there at all. But now, if every time you're reading through the New Testament, when it comes to the word call or called, you just heard it as churched, churching, it would ring the way that the original word rings. Okay, so the original word ecclesia, it's not just call, it's call out. Okay, but you would still say call out. It's the same root, call. And that is only used, this word ecclesia, a few times by Jesus, and the New Testament authors use a little bit more in the epistles, but not a ton. It's not the most used word, and again, certainly in the Gospels, but Jesus does use it a few times. So Matthew 16, verse 18, after Peter has confessed that he's the Christ, and Jesus tells him that he's a little rock, and on the big rock, which again, you don't even see that in the Greek either, right? Because there are two different words there for rock, Peter and rock. I will build my ecclesia, my calling out, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Now, Lutherans are wont to say that you are the Christ is this rock on which the ecclesia, the calling out, will be built. Jesus is the Christ. That's the call. He is risen from the dead. Oh, look, on that people will be called out. It's very straightforward. It's like literal talk, right? So that's the word church as it first shows up. It shows up also in Matthew 18, and I don't know if I searched for it here either. So let's see, church. There it is. Yeah, I did. So Matthew 18, this is where we're dealing a little bit with kind of what you're talking about. What do you do with someone who isn't acting the way they should act in the church? And it says, go once by yourself. If they won't hear you, go with another. I mean, you could take that route, bring an elder along. You aren't coming to church. We're going to remove you from the roster. Like, you can do that. Or you can just realize they're gone. They've self-excommunicated, and you don't have to rub them off the mailing list just because they're not coming to church anymore. That seems a lot easier to me in terms of stress load. But if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the ecclesia, those who are called out. And that seems to be a specific group of people, right? If he refuses even to hear the ecclesia, the called out ones, let him be to you as a heathen or a tax collector. Well, okay, so once they're no longer coming to church at all, aren't they refusing to hear the church? I mean, isn't that kind of the point of it? Like, they just won't come to church, right? So you do need to recognize that they're not in church. So, and if the church is the body of Christ, they're self-excluding from the body of Christ. Now, does that mean they won't go to heaven? Jesus judges on the last day. I don't know what faintly glimmering wick they've got. And, well, is it my duty to go make the faintly glimmering wick blow up? If I know who they are, if I can go do that. But, like, again, just a random list of people? No, it's not. It's a man-made facade, right? And, again, it's a social club maintenance is what we're dealing with. So here we see in Acts chapter 2, the church, a vital church grows is the heading of the King James section. Is at the end of Peter's Pentecost sermon, where it talks about how they, many words they testified, exhorted them, saying, "Be saved from this perverse generation." Many believed and were added to their numbers, 3,000 souls that day. They continue in the apostles' doctrine and the fellowship and the breaking of bread and prayers. There's your church definition again. This is what it means to gather together, and it's what? They're being called out to hear what the apostles taught, the doctrine, the word of God, the scripture being taught. The fellowship, koinonia, that's a pretty key, like Lord's Supper-ish kind of word, especially when it's in the context of the breaking of bread. So you can look at 1 Corinthians 10 and 11 for that. And the prayers, that's not why we're here. Fear came upon every soul. Many wonders and signs are being done. All who believed were together and had all things in common. So their possessions divided them. Anyone had needs. So daily, continuing with one another in the temple, breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness, simplicity, praising God, and having favor with all people. And the Lord added to the ecclesia, added to those who were being called out. Okay, hear it that way. Added to those who are being called out of darkness into the marvelous light every day. So speaking of that, then let's look at a couple of words that use the word calling, places where they use the word calling, and let's put the word church in these places. So Ephesians chapter 1, our Lord Jesus Christ may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of him, verse 18, the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of his church. His calling, right? His call out to you. What's that hope? The riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints. That is, you and others being saved And what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us who believe? Notice how church, his calling is connected to believing. You believe what the calling says. Church is a place to hear and believe, according to the working of his mighty power. You can shift ahead to Ephesians chapter 4, and you have similar talk. It's all over the New Testament, this talk. These are just a couple examples. But Paul says, I, therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the churching with which you were churched, with all lowliness and gentleness, long-suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I mean, that's why you would reach out to someone who's missing. There is one body, one Spirit, just as you were churched in one hope of your churching, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. So the idea here, again, is to see that what is church is not a list of people who belong to a club or an institution or a structure. It is those who are hearing something and believing it. That's the definition of it, right? And so that's how I define a member of the church. It's somebody who is hearing and believing. So if you have people who were members of the body that are no longer members of the body, what do you do about that? If you know who they are, reach out to them. Anyone who's received a list of 15 or 50 or 75 people and you don't know who they are, you know that that's like impossible. I mean, you could do it. You can cold call them all. Unto what end? Unto a lot of answering machines. And you can do it, but to what level should you do it? I'm not going to tell you should do it. I think what you should do is feed the sheep. Feed the lambs, right? Disciple the disciples in the certainty that the Lord builds his church. He said that. I will build my church, not you. I will build my church. On what? The confession, the teaching that he's risen. Right? And so, all right, just in case you think I'm way out on a limb on this one, I figured I'd go straight to the confessions. It's been a little while. Man, Article 5 on the ministry, Augsburg Confession says, that we may obtain this faith, that's the justifying faith of Article 4, that we may obtain this faith, the ministry of teaching the gospel and administering the sacraments was instituted. The ministry is what? It's teaching the gospel and administering the sacraments. Is it keeping track of numbers? It doesn't say that. You could do that as an ancillary way of doing it, but it doesn't say like that's the primary thing, right? So, for through the word and the sacraments, as through instruments, the Holy Ghost is given, who works faith when and where it pleases God in them that hear the gospel. To wit, that God, not for, and then they talk about the gospel now, God not for our own merits, but for Christ's sake. I love it. Article 5 is about the ministry that teaches Article 4, and they go back to Article 4 by the time they're done with Article 5, right? It was that important to them. So Article 7 of the church says also they teach, that's us, that the one holy church is to continue forever. You mean the church can't be broken? It can't fall away? The church can't. Right? The church is the congregation of saints. Notice congregation meaning not an institution with a constitution that votes on things, but go back to what that word to congregate means. Gather around. The gathering around of the saints in which the gospel is rightly taught. What are they gathering around? The teaching of the gospel, that ministry we just talked about, and the sacraments being rightly administered. To the unity of the church, it is enough to agree concerning the doctrine of the gospel, administration of the sacraments, nor is it necessary that human traditions, that is, rites and ceremonies instituted by men, should be everywhere alike. So again, how do you want to keep track of the people who no longer come to church? Do you want to? Once they don't, do you have to go through and remove them, or can you just ignore it? No, I think you can just ignore it. I really do. I mean, are you watching the world fall apart? We might even have, it's not fair. We'll have computers. But what happens if the power goes out? How important is this? This is where, the old way was with a book. Man, church I'm at now, they went all to digital in the 80s. Big mistake. Big mistake. And getting back to the book, I've tried kind of starting that up. It's not easy because someone's got to go in and write in everybody's name. Oh my goodness. All right. Article 8, what the church is. So we have a second article on the church in Augsburg Confession. Although the church properly is the congregation of the saints and true believers, like I just said, nevertheless, since in this life many hypocrites and evil persons are mingled therewith, it is lawful to use sacraments administered by evil men according to the saying of Christ. The Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Both the sacrament and the word are effectual by reason of the institution commanded by Christ. notwithstanding they be administered by evil men. So that is to say that there are evil people in the church, and some of them are even pastors. And the baptism done by an evil pastor is still a baptism if it's in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. But let's just stick with the first part here rather than the Donatist controversy. So hypocrites and evil persons are mingled in the people that are visibly called out. And so again, if they decide to demonstrate their lack of faith, no longer meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, how much should you all make it a priority to go and chase them? I'm not saying don't have a phone call to somebody who just stopped coming, right? It's just like you start near and spread out rather than trying to have the big plan. Yeah. So, all right. I think that's enough on that. I feel like I have to justify it because I know that my answer that I gave is not the standard training that we get in the Missouri Synod. Like the idea is they've got this old guard idea that you can just actually manage everybody. And I don't know what world they lived in where you could manage everybody, but it's not the world we live in. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to reach those who you know you can reach, but you're going to have to make decisions between what you can do and what you can't do. And I really think that when you have the sheep there, you want to feed those sheep. The parable of the lost sheep isn't about leaving the people at church without care because you're exhausted writing emails and chasing down people on the phone, trying to get one person out. Maybe you do that all, and that one person turns out to be someone who's, thank God they're in heaven. I mean, I'm not condemning it. I'm saying it's not a moral imperative, and there's a difference there, right? Let your conscience be your guide. Yeah. Huh? You good? All right. So here we go. Caleb says, one of your sermons on 1 Peter, you said Christianity is not about being saved. It's about being disciplined by God. I think I agree, but could you please expand on that idea and explain it more from the scriptures? I could see someone hearing that statement as heretical because it makes Christianity not about the gospel. Does it now? I would disagree with that person. But how would you answer them? I see many people in my church and synod like to say that Christian freedom or it's all about the gospel, but then live with no discipline. It always bothers me, but I mostly get dismissed with that's legalism or some similar content. Well, certainly legalism is a problem, right? So I'm not advocating legalism, nor am I advocating that one's response to the gospel is that by which they know they are justified. But to go back to the phrase, Christianity is not about being saved. It's about being disciplined by God. I'm referring to Christianity isn't about how a long time from now you get to go to heaven. Christianity is about how God's making you a disciple right now. Right? And so the text I would point you to right away is 2 Corinthians chapter 6, where Paul says, we then as workers together with him also plead with you not to receive the grace of God in vain, for he says, in an acceptable time I have heard you, in the day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. So there it uses the word salvation. So it is about being saved. I'm not saying it's not about being saved. I'm saying it's not about like this, I'm going to get out of jail later. Yay. You're out of jail now. And the way you're out of jail now is that you've been discipled, disciplined. They're the same word. Make disciples, disciplined, structured, chastened, reformed, born again, regenerated, justified, I don't care, sanctified. I don't care which word you use. They're all God doing it to you to raise you from the dead now. And that was my point. Okay. If it's about salvation, it's about what am I going to get? How can I use this thing to have a better something, right? If you die today, are you going to have as good a life in heaven as you want? Or are you going to go to hell? It's a bad place. You better repent. Like, that's a tit for tat kind of thing. Whereas what was being revealed to us is that our God is way better than we could ask or imagine. And that even after all of us should have been destroyed, he is saving us. And he's doing that by discipling us, by making us into those who hear his call and believe it. That is, those who have a discipline that has been imposed on us, including the discipline of he is risen, right? Including the discipline of I wash you now into my holy name. And the fact that we can only hear that discipline as law shows you how fallen we are. That the gospel is not the discipline of God upon us. The only way we can hear it is some sort of bad thing that shows us our sin, right? As opposed to, I mean, when you put a wire or a stick beside a little tree that's growing in the wind so it grows up straight, that's discipline, okay? And I'm not going to say that's a metaphor for the law or the gospel, but I'm certainly going to say that the man who comes along and does it to the tree cares about the tree. And it's not the tree's doing in any way, shape, or form. It's what the man has done to the tree. When you fertilize the tree, that goes to the parable. You fertilize the tree. That's disciplining the tree. It's making a disciple of the tree. And so my beef here is again like Matthew 28 says. Jesus is risen. He's go therefore and make disciples of all nations. This isn't about conversion. This isn't about how many people we can trick into believing in Jesus. This is about the This is about the fact that faith in Christ now is resurrection from the dead now. So again, if you just think it's about something later, you're missing it. You might still get the heaven later. I don't know. I don't know what little childlike faith you've got, but the point is, like, you can mature in it now. And that doesn't mean you've kind of got this overcomer's victorious living or whatever. I've left sin behind. I only have a fruitful life. It's about having hope now. And the hope, of course, is for the thorns and the thistles to go away, but it's also the knowledge that the true God is your God today, and he hears what you have to say. He wants to answer your prayers, and he does not intend to leave you in a place in which you cannot hope in him. So ask him for what you desire most, and then attend to where he speaks, because that's where he's going to answer the question. If you're going to sit there and pray all day about what you want and then never open the Proverbs, I mean, well, you get what you get. But to be in the Psalms and the Proverbs, to be in the New Testament Gospels, the words of Jesus, the red letters, and I'm not going to dismiss the epistles, and I love the Kings and all this kind of stuff, but to be in that on a regular basis, asking God to sustain your faith, you're going to be up believing that he's with you and not against you, no matter what suffering comes your way, because you're going to begin to see that even the chastening that you receive is a blessing. So this is where the law-gospel dynamic falls apart, not because law-gospel's wrong, but because we've caricaturized the thing so that the law is bad, when it's not. It's never been bad. You don't save yourself by you doing it, but you are saved by him into it. Not the letter, but the spirit. That is, not you better, but love your neighbor kind of rocks. Yeah? So that's what I meant. I hope that made sense. I think that made sense. What do you think?
I think it's hard for us in this era when disciplining children is such a controversy or frowned upon so much to understand, okay, discipline is a good thing.
Discipline is frowned upon, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's maybe where we get hung up as a society, or part of where we do. It also kind of goes along with what you were just saying to, was it Marlowe? About it's the job of the church to remain steadfast. The church is to be there through the storm so that the people can gather under her wings and receive Christ. Right? And not to cower in the corner just because somebody doesn't like it or people stopped coming. Like, even if people stopped coming, you continue on to pray for the church. Yeah. The capital C church.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and that's true too. And just back to the delinquent thing, the inactives, like, which do you think is more powerful? You taking 30 seconds in the morning to pray for God to send faithful people to that pulpit and altar, including as many of the delinquents as he desires? Or are you giving 40 hours that week to making phone calls? I'm not saying do one and not the other. I'm just saying the whole scenario seems to be upside down, and you need to get it right side up in your heart. Yeah? An age in which people despise discipline. So this word right here in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, it's also in chapter 1, verse 2. It is also in chapter 1, verse 3. I believe that's the only place it shows up in this section, but it will show up again in chapter 1, verse 8. In the King James, it's instruction every time. But what is the difference between wisdom and instruction? And, well, it's a little easier when you translate this word as discipline. As discipline, meaning that instruction which forms you from the outside, as opposed to wisdom is that insight being formed, you now begin to see, right? And knowledge is more like factual things. So it is the observation of knowledge that combined with the discipline of structure that gives you wisdom. And wisdom can see both those things and see how they're different from each other. And so, again, why we're here is in part to say that, and in part to say, now look, if you don't think discipline's good, you're a fool. Like this. That's what it says. This is you're a fool. It's like really early in Proverbs. Like this is a setup for the whole thing, right? So we live in an age of folly. And I don't think, with this meaning discipline, I don't think Matthew 28 is just kind of random. Like him deciding, I'm going to name you all disciples. Like, I don't think that's some random thing. And then granted, it comes through English, so it is a little bit of a pun here, but I don't think it is. The idea is the same idea. Jesus believes discipline is good, not as law, right? Nor as gospel in the sense of a promise, but as just experience. That the life that we live is one that is within a structure he has made, which from breathing to getting up in the morning to eating, that's all discipline as opposed to wisdom, right? Wisdom's what you eat. Yeah? So an age in which people, here a kid's playing guitar. Yeah. An age in which people despise discipline is an age of fools. And if churches are saying, now you're of course, the question was saying, I could imagine churches saying that, I think, or somebody saying that. But, yeah, people do. People do. They despise it.
Is it discipline to hold my child's hand while I cross the street?
Yes.
So that he or she gets there safely.
Yeah, it's like the definition of it. Yeah.
And so is that a bad thing? Not really, right?
Right.
No, it's a very good thing.
And does the child have to think of it as some sort of like chastisement or something?
Right. The fact that God the Father is saying, I'm saving you now.
Yeah.
Hold my hand. I'm holding your hand.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's get it right here.
Right. And in that way, it is a gospel word as well. I mean, it's not really either law or gospel by itself as a word. It's a word. But you can understand it as gospel, just like sanctification. And so, yeah. All right. Oh, they're singing.
Can you hear it?
Yeah. Christ alone, huh? Good for them. Liam says this, I'm in the final stages of becoming a pastor, considering building a men's-women's group based on something like Sons of Solomon, Daughters of Wisdom. What is the best way to go about establishing such group? Ask Jesus now. Ask him. Jesus, please. I'm not kidding. Like, I'm not being snide. Like, stop thinking you're going to do it. Ask him. Like, every day. Don't stop. And start the Sons of Solomon discipline yourself now. If you aren't doing it, do it. Not so that you'll get. Just do it because it's good. And it'll spread. It'll spread. We live in a society that is increasingly hostile toward the idea that men and women are different, and I'd like to hear about any hurdles you may have encountered. Well, why does Daughters of Wisdom exist? Is because, like, as soon as I started Sons of Solomon, where's the women's group? And it's like, you have one, ladies, locally, you're gonna experience at some point women in the congregation, there will be some, not all, there'll be some women in the congregation who will let you know that it's weird that you have a men's thing that's just for men. And what you need to do is just be like, oh, okay. And then just go on and keep doing it. And it'll just vanish. They'll forget and they'll move on and they'll be fine. So my advice is that you do use Sons of Solomon and Daughters of Wisdom as a discipline when you promote, because they are designed to need minimal involvement from you as a teacher and to be something which spreads itself rather than you have to always be active teaching how to spread it. And it was kind of designed that way on purpose to be infectious, to be leaven that just kind of spreads. And my experience of it is, again, I started it and promoted it here online and never promoted it in my congregation. And it showed up in my congregation. Now, obviously, I have a couple people who pay attention to what I was doing online at some point in some way. But my point is that, again, like, it doesn't take much. It takes like one or two guys that decide to do it. And if they start doing the discipline for a while, they will see its benefit and they'll want to tell somebody else about it, because it does just change the way you pray. And it certainly provides eye-opening wisdom when you do that smart note of a proverb or spend time in the Proverbs every day. And so in that regard, rather than like be like, hey, church, we're doing a men's group now, like instead, like just pay attention you're about to be there. For your first 6 months, just sort of pay attention to the men who are listening. Any guys who talk to you after church, because they just want to talk to you, like, try to get them to pick up one of these booklets and take it home and start using it and say, hey, let's do this for a year. Us 5. Let's just do this for a year. And maybe we'll meet once a month or something. Yeah, let's not make a big deal about it. Let's just kind of do it. That will pay dividends. Yeah. You try to make it a big show where everyone's invited and we're going to do a men's, it's just going to be a bunch of effort that feels disappointing. No matter how successful it is, you're going to feel like it wasn't good enough. So do less, pray more would be my answer there. He asks at the end, Mrs. Fisk, what can I do to alleviate the stress that comes with being a pastor's wife as I enter the ministry? Because I'm married with kids. So he's talking about how can he alleviate his wife.
Oh,
yeah,
that's sweet.
Having kids.
First, before we leave the Sons of Solomon, Daughters of Wisdom topic, being a woman who does pray the Daughters of Wisdom, I say this with all love to my sisters in Christ. Focus on the men's group. That's my take on it. Because the men will lead the women, and we need them. We need them up there.
Yeah. That is part of why Sons of Solomon came about as an idea also. Yeah. Was my conviction that we had to catch the young men. Yeah. We had to do something different and aim at them with everything, like point every weapon at them, young men. And that if we got some young men, I'm pretty sure God's going to send women. Like, they're not going to just end up, they could end up a bunch of monks, but they're not going to end up a bunch of monks.
I mean, personal confession, I actually, I balked at the idea of becoming a daughter of wisdom or praying the prayers that are listed for us, just because I saw it as counter the point. The Sons of Solomon was to reach the men. So let it be. And then there was request and pious request. And so that was met. And, rightly so, the prayers are good prayers. They have, they've been a source of guidance in many a situation for me, as I have asked, Lord, I don't know what to do. And then I've gone to do my prayer and been like, oh, that's what I have to do.
Oh, Proverbs 31 is a treat, isn't it?
Well, it's actually Psalm 133, whiit begins our day. And it's, I always want to say how beautiful, but it's how blessed How blessed are the brothers?
How blessed it is when brothers dwell together in unity.
It is when brothers dwell together in unity. It's very challenging, ladies, to pray that prayer when you have a little rift between you and your hubby.
Ooh.
Just saying.
Yeah. All right then.
It's like, oh.
Just putting it out there.
Okay, Lord.
Yeah.
I know what I have to do now.
You know why that psalm got picked? I mean,
no, honestly, I've thought many times I should just on the show be like, okay, lay it out there, hun, because why these? There are so many others.
All the Sons of Solomon psalms are the Psalms of Ascent.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There were, I believe, 2 or 3 that didn't fit into the package.
Okay.
That was one of them. You actually have 2 of them. I think there's one that's not there.
135?
Yeah. And 121's not there. I lifted my eyes to the foothills, right? Mm-hmm. So, which is, that one's famous enough. I say that one every day. Anyway, but so there are those 2. But so, you know, I get this request, and what about the women? I'm like, okay, well, then you're going to get Proverbs 31.
Take that.
Take that.
It even says, do not give your power to women.
Yeah. And it's like, no, but look, the Magnificat and Hannah's prayer, I mean, these are beautiful things. But then it's like, before I got to that point, and even Proverbs 31, it's like, oh, well, here's this Psalm of Ascent that's praying for the men to be men. So, oh, ladies, you want to get involved? Here, pray for the men. How blessed it is when when the men at the church dwell together in pious unity around the word and sacraments of Jesus Christ. Pray for that, ladies. Pray for that, because in that you will find, it's like Jeremiah's words to the people of Israel in Babylon, build houses, live in them, pray for the good of your country, for in its good you will find your good. Okay, well, in the good of your men, you will find your good, ladies. Yeah. And so that's why.
I think it's funny that I'm so incurvatus that I was like, oh, brethren, me, oh, me and my husband, oh, all the Christians in my household.
Which it can have that implication. However, in the Old Testament worldview, it usually didn't have that implication. So, yeah.
So then you finally said to me, get over yourself, start praying the prayers. So I was like, okay.
Please.
So I did.
I said, please.
Oh, of course you did. But as far as alleviating some of the, how does Liam put it?
I threw it away.
Stress. Some of the stress that comes with being a pastor's wife. It's a thing to live in a fishbowl. Maybe your home isn't a fishbowl, like you have a congregation that will respect your time away from the parish. Ours is really good about that. Like, we don't have people knocking on the door at odd hours, but that hasn't always been the case. And there was a time when it was like, oh no, I don't come out of the bedroom until I'm ready. Because this could get embarrassing. But it is a thing to recognize it's not a bad fishbowl to live in. People are watching you because they respect the office that you hold, you fill, that your husband fills. They want to do it the way you do it because you have put energy into it. So I guess what I learned was I could either walk around with a frown, or I could walk around acknowledging the fact that people are looking at me and so smile. I know that it's a lot of pressure to try to have your kids behave really well in church. Well, you can stress out about them being perfect, or you can recognize that this is your opportunity as a congregation to become a congregation that loves children and be an example of a mother who maybe says, hey, elderly sister in Christ, would you, as a widow, come sit with me and help me because my kiddos are crazy right now? Or, owning our flaws, owning the places where we actually need help. It's vulnerable, but it's also beautiful.
Do you walk up to people at church and say, hey, elderly sister in Christ? I love it.
No, I don't. And honestly, I never did, because I guess I didn't feel like to be real, I never had somebody tell me that was okay. But over the years, just watching women's faces as they watch the young mother care for her baby, I've noticed it's a blessing and a gift to have you there. So,
you remind me of Heath Curtis. So second time he shows up this show, he's pastor in Central Illinois, and I think he just was.
Oh,
he might have just had a call to a synodical position of some kind, but I could be wrong about that. But he had spent time doing a consulting for St. Paul when we were looking at some budgetary issues when we first got here, and he told another story about how he's actually a crack shot, single, I don't know how we do it, target shooter with a 6-shooter or something like that, and competes. And so he had visited a gun club down in his area the previous week or two, or maybe it's an old story, I don't know. But so he went in and he was there, and there were 2 other guys there, and the whole time that he was there shooting, they're complaining about the club. And on his way out, they said, hey, so you're going to come back? You want to join the club? It only costs this much a month. And I don't know if he said it out loud, but it's like, you just spent the entire hour saying how much it sucks. Why would I come back?
yeah.
And so there's something to that about, like, just learn to love what you got. Embrace it for what it is.
Someone once suggested, it must have been as we were exiting seminary, that in some of the various classes that the wives get to go to, someone said that if you, as the wife, complain about your husband having to do certain jobs in the congregation, then your kids are going to grow up complaining about it. So if at the dinner table you finally pull the roast out and you've got the mashed potatoes and the gravy and the whole spread, and then he receives a call that somebody's just gone to the hospital and he has to leave, well, you have a choice there. You can either complain about it and throw a fit, or you can give him a kiss on the cheek and send him out the door with the supper in a sack, whatever it is. But you do have a choice to make it something that people see as a desirable position, or you can make it into something that's awful. And I guess I chose to kind of embrace it. After a while, it was kind of fun. It's been fun to learn from the congregation, each congregation we've been to, different things, and realizing that I'm not really there to teach them as much as I'm there to learn from them.
So, one of the things I've said to you in the past, and I think it really is worth reckoning with, although it can be misunderstood like everything. Clergy are the lowest rung on elite society, going back to as far as we have professional clergy. So what that means is, in a very bizarre way, clergy are royalty. They're not blooded, right? It's not like they can tax you, okay? But the point is, the way that the culture sees you in the facility is as the royalty that's locally there, right? And that means that the wife she's the queen. I mean, the pastor's shepherd, Old Testament, word means king. She's the queen. Now with the sword, you rule just by the wisdom of your mouth. And if you don't have any wisdom, no one's going to listen. But again, they're going to look at you as the local lord. And you are there in the stead and by the command of your Lord as his ambassador, right? That's the role. So the more that you, as the wife of the pastor, can just embrace the fact that you're the local royalty, what do people need from the queen? Charity, comfort, smiling face, an eye on the poor, the seeing those who are most left out and not ignoring them. And that way, it's also, the other image is father and mother. So the pastor is the father of the church. You don't have to call him father for it to be he is. He's going to be the father of the church. And so the more that the pastor's wife can embrace her identity as the mother of those people, not that She doesn't need a ministry. She doesn't need to go and form boards and committees and all this. None of that is in my mindset here. It's just a mentality that these are my children. These are my children, all of them. And the misbehaving ones too, right? And so how would I treat my children in this, that, or that situation? This is the kind of, again, charity that I'm here to provide for this people as an image, as a symbol, because the fatherhood is not, it's not like I'm feeding everybody at church, well, I guess supper, but it's not like I'm like paying the bills, so it's a symbolic fatherhood and a symbolic motherhood. And so that goes back to the royalty. It largely is about the image that you give. You're putting on an heir for the sake of all to see something that looks like Christianity and imitate it. Now, when I say put it on an heir, I don't mean hypocritically. I don't mean faking it. I mean, you recognize you're there to be looked at. They're going to look at you. If you're the pastor, they're going to listen to you. So you can read a piece of paper for 15 minutes or you can talk to them, right? They're there to listen to you. And so the pastor's wife is there to be listened to, but in a very different way. Usually in a corner, not in the front, right? And again, to be kind of just seen as an image of the church herself. Pious, dedicated, committed, rolling with the punches, caring for the weak, caring for the young. Yeah. And so embracing that heart, I think, is kind of the key thing. How do you as a man get her to do that? Well, I hope you married the right girl, honestly. Precious than rubies.
Yeah, it's Lord, let me love them with my whole heart. I think that for me, thinking about having people come to my home and how do I want to welcome them and receive them has helped me to welcome and receive people when they come to church. I'm not the first one to be there. And oftentimes I'm the last one to slip into the pew before everything starts. But at the same time, like something that I do is I stand by my husband as he greets everyday in the holy handshake line.
They love that.
And I love it too. Honestly, I'll
you're the one who holds the line up.
I do. It's such a blessing to have people pour their hearts out to you and you're like, wow, thank you. Thank you for thank you for trusting me with this deep pain that you have or this amazing joy that you're experiencing. They come to you with theology questions and they come to me with just life.
Oh, they come to me with
that's
I get life more than theology.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
But so loving them open arms.
Yeah.
Having that kind of mentality is, I think, the best thing. And from there, whatever comes of it, excuse me as I take a drink. Like whatever your specific gifts are, they will shine through if you go in just wanting to be used by Christ to love the people.
Yeah. Yeah. Even the ones that don't deserve it, especially the ones that don't deserve it.
Yeah, it's kind of an amazing mirror that gets held up in front of you. It's like parenting.
Yeah, it is.
When you parent your children, you have this mirror held up in front of your face and it shows you all of your worst flaws and your best traits. And yet as the mother of the congregation, walking with people through pain does the same thing.
Yeah.
You see, we were reading this story about Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's wife tonight during confirmation class. And I had this moment of, at first it was like, oh man, she looked back. How could she have doubted? And then it was like, oh, Christ have mercy. I don't know that I would have done any better. Because it's not like just happening behind her. There's noise and the ground was probably vibrating and it's all sorts of chaos. How do you, so it's, you have been given a great gift. Yeah. Just enjoy it.
Yeah. It's the opportunity to see more clearly. Last one we're at 9:00, but I want to try to knock this one out here because I think we can. And it is really an interesting question. Nathan says this. He says, my wife wore a veil for the first time on Ash Wednesday. She has decided to practice this part of the liturgy throughout Lent, that is, veiling as she goes to church. However, we are converts, meaning to Lutheranism, right? How do you practice veiling in a respectful way, especially in a church where no one else is veiling? So this is really, really fascinating to me. Pastor, do you support women choosing to veil? I'm going to say no. You can. So I'm not going to say it's like you better not. But in your scenario where nobody else does it, it's fascinating. Like, you're in the Lutheran church because you joined the Lutheran church and they might have forgotten this side or the other thing, but why would you come to this thing that you just found that you think it's amazing and change it? Like, what's the difference between deciding we're going to veil even though no one else veils and deciding we're going to have a praise band even though nobody else does? In my mind, adiaphora is the topic. Formula of Concord, Article 10. You're a convert, you got your Book of Concord, right? So Formula of Concord, Article 10, the things neither commanded nor forbidden. The key component in that entire article is whatever we change, let's do it together. So do I support veiling when no one else is doing it? No. Now we're going to look at 1 Corinthians 11, and I'm going to try to convince you that biblically there's no mandate on this thing. Now, are you free to veil? Yeah, absolutely. And does anybody care? Probably not. Okay. But like, they're going to think it's weird. Somebody will think it's weird. And as long as you're cool with that, like, whatever, right? How do you, I mean, it is strange in this culture. It really is. If you were to be in a Middle Eastern culture, yeah, I don't know, maybe a little different. Meridith, do you veil? No.
I don't.
No.
But personal story. What was it for the first 6 months of our marriage?
Oh, true enough.
I wore a handkerchief on my head to go to church.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not completely outside of that pious, desire to follow the letter of.
What else happened at that same time? You remember?
What are you referring to?
Well, what did my hair look like when we got married?
Oh, you had long hair.
And then?
Yes. And then he cut it.
I cut it.
Okay, so story. Well, you went to seminary. You were told at the interview, I thought, you had to cut your hair.
I just found 1 Corinthians 11 in the Bible.
Oh.
I cut my hair and you started wearing a handkerchief.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I can see why someone would read it and come away with the impression that that's what should happen. The trick is you're not reading all of it. He says, I know Lutherans have historically veiled ? No, I don't think we have. I think that many Western cultures, women have simply worn hats and or head coverings in public, but not always, again. And so you say, what stopped the practice? Hats, moving from veils to hats and then hats to nothing. Strangely, I mean, women are still allowed to wear hats in churches. Men aren't, right? So the practice hasn't quite stopped. But before I just try to deal with a historical thing, I'd rather take us to the text. Because I think it's really important that you see all of this text and not just the part where Paul is dealing with whatever was going on in Corinth that was specific. So 1 Corinthians 11, chapter 11, verse 2, where he says, I praise you, brethren, you remember me in all the things and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. That's actually a really important little section right there. That he says they're not doing anything wrong. Okay, he's about to talk about this. He says they're not doing anything wrong, even though they're divided over it. Now, in a moment, you scroll down a little bit, when he talks about the Lord's Supper, he says the opposite. In verse 17, he says, now in giving these instructions, I do not praise you, since you come together not for the better, for both are worse. So this whole section on head coverings is actually kind of a non-section. Like there's not a problem unless you want to make a problem. All right. Whereas the Lord's Supper, y'all getting drunk, that's a problem. Okay, he's going to get real straight up on that. Okay, so first, you remember what I taught you, and this isn't one of those things, so it's not a big deal. But I want you to remember this. Like this, don't forget. Verse 3. The head of every man is Christ, the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Okay, this is classic headship teaching, Ephesians 5, Colossians 2. I think it's 2. It's Colossians. Are classic texts on this that go into a greater detail on the relationship between a husband and his wife. But here you have it made into a Trinitarian reality, right? So that the relationship of man to woman is connected to the relationship of Jesus to the Father. All right. So that's pretty cool. And he's like, this you need to know. You're not allowed to debate this. The Trinity and the relationship of man and woman are eternal orders. Okay. Or at least natural eternal orders. Well, the Trinity is eternal. Man and woman are natural. How man and woman work out in the resurrection is fascinating, but they won't be mushed. We just might not be married, won't be married. So anyway, so now then there's the part where it gets a little more interesting. Okay, so he just declares every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonors his head. Every woman praying or prophesying with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Okay, so here's something that he declares it as some kind of permanent reality, right? That to cover the man's head is to dishonor him. To uncover the woman's head is to dishonor her. Okay, so from here we're going to veil, right? Therefore, you got to wear a veil. Wait, he's not done yet. He's going to go into great detail to explain how long hair is a woman's covering, right? So if you have long hair, you don't need to veil. If you're going to shave your head like a butch lesbian, maybe it'd be better to cover it, he kind of says. Okay? He actually says, I'm not making this up, that one is the same as if her head were shaved. Okay? If a woman is not covered, let her hair be shorn. It is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved. Let her be covered. By the way, all these fours that are in here in this next from verses 6 to 7, it's a very awkward Greek in here. And so it is a section that I would declare to you to be confusing. What's his point? A man ought indeed not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. Woman is the glory of man. That's his point. Man is the image and glory of God. Woman is the glory of man. So what he's getting to again is we need to distinguish man and woman from each other. That's the primary thing he's thrusting at here. That men shouldn't look like women. Women shouldn't look like men. How does that happen? He's going to get to the bottom and he's going to tell you, well, you're going to have to figure that out. Like where you're at, it might be different than where someone else is, right? Before he gets to that, verses 8 through 11, he's just going to emphasize how man and woman are distinct from each other, how that doesn't make one better than the other, even though one is over the other, that they both come from each other continually now, and therefore we should not in any way lord it over each other, and that even the angels kind of care about a woman having a symbol of authority on her head that is not looking like a man. Okay, not looking like a man. But then again, keep reading. Judge for yourselves. Very important. You remember me in all things. You keep the traditions as I delivered them to you. My answer to this question is judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Judge for yourself. Does not even nature teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a dishonor to him? Well, wait a minute. How do we get to hair? Well, he's pointing out, okay, well, if a woman has long hair, it's her glory. Her hair is given to her as a covering. That's the point. Like, so is it proper for a woman to pray with her head uncovered? Well, if she's got long hair, her head's covered. You don't have to cover it. Now, what about the man having short hair or long hair and it being a dishonor to him? I'll come back to that in a second. But let's finish with the main point. Well, not the main point. Main point is man and woman are different. Second main point is if anyone wants to have a contention about this, we have no customs about it, nor does any church of God. Right? So there's no law here. There's no rule here. There's no universal prohibition or commandment here. You need to judge for yourselves. How do you, as a group, make women and men appear different to each other? And now what you're doing specifically is you're going into a group and you're saying, this is how we're going to do it. But no one else in the group's doing it. So how is that going to help the group learn to distinguish? That's the thing. And if the answer is, well, the Bible says you have to, see, that's not going to help. Because now you're making a law where there's no law. So do I support it? I don't care if someone wanted to come to St. Paul and veil because they think they need to. I actually, honestly, in my heart, I'd be like, that's sad. They're legalists. They think that's the only way to do it. Whereas right now, the war is pretty big. Like the war against man and woman is pretty big. And we're not going to solve it by being like legalism, right? It's not going to do it. What we have to do is embrace, I'm a man, you're a woman. Let's like be different. And honestly, the hairstyle has everything to do with it right now. Why am I doing this? How many women do this? They don't. Maybe a butch again. Trying to be man. Because men do this with beards. Why? Because it actually isn't being imitated by women. You know what's imitated by women? Short hair. A lot of women with short hair. It looks like men's hair, then they're women. And you can't tell the difference. Right? So this is actually trying to embrace something that looks masculine. Now, maybe it isn't. And some guys will be like, it doesn't look masculine. Okay, well, fine. Judge for yourself. Don't be contentious about it. Look masculine. Women, look feminine. If you want to wear a veil, fine. You want to wear a nice big bonnet? Do it. You know, men, don't wear nice big bonnets. It's not going to work, right? We're not supposed to create a custom that is belonging to the whole church of God. We are to judge for ourselves how we can put forward to make it clear that the head of every man is Christ, the head of every woman is man, head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Yeah? So, I will also say, I'll pull it down. I mean, there are girls who shave the sides of their heads, right? There are girls who do this. It's not really a feminine look, right? And so, you know, the barbarian long hair is not quite what he's getting at here, as opposed to the glory of woman's hair. Like, they're going to spend all this time doing stuff to their hair, making it look beautiful. There are guys who do that these days. That's what he's saying don't do, right? Look like a man, look like a woman. And how long does in your culture, which styles say which? And in our culture, none of the styles say anything, except for that a few kind of say things more or less. But again, you're going to find men wearing women's hairstyles now. You're going to find women wearing men's hairstyles now. And so what you want to do is try to embrace things that clearly distinguish you as you, where you are, which is going to have things to do with now. Clothing is going to be a part of this. You know, what are you wearing? How you carry yourself, how you talk, right? You know, do you talk with a lisp? You know, and again, it's a caricature, but it's also real, right? So the entire section is about preserving the order of creation. And if you're just going to say, well, therefore we have to wear veils, in my mind, like you're not going to convince anybody. You're picking the fight where the fight isn't. And those who might be with you are just going to think you're weird or legalistic. What you want to do is join with those who are with you and make it clear who you are, right? And don't burden your conscience with rules that don't really exist. But I mean, if at the end of the day, you love veils and you think veils are beautiful and this is a great way to just be beautiful, like do it, right? But don't do it because you think you have to. Judge for yourselves. Yeah? And you can judge for yourself. That's kind of the point. Do you want to jump in on that more?
Oh, I think you answered it very well. It's very liberating to not have to worry about earning or, making sure that when I was wearing a scarf or a bandana on my head to church, if I forgot or something else happened, I remember having a burden in my heart, like, oh no, I messed up. And there's no assurance of forgiveness when you start down that path.
Yeah.
The grace just completely goes out the door. And so I think what you said is liberating and refocuses us on the gift of grace that we have in Christ and what he has done for us.
Yeah. And so, you know, woman, your hair is given to you to be beautiful. So it doesn't have to be long to be beautiful. But if like you shave your head, it's not going to be beautiful, right? And then Like, what happens when a woman gets cancer and her hair falls out? What's she normally do?
Covers her
She
head.
covers her head. Do bald guys cover their heads? Nah, not as much. Right, so that's the nature. You can see the nature is there. So build on the nature. And that's his point. Like, let nature shine. And don't bury it. Don't go against it. And, it's all connected to prostitution in Corinth, and that's part of the issue as well. And that's where the shoring was a sign of prostitution and things. But build on the nature. All right. So it is 15 after 9 o'clock. I said I would promote. We should have done this earlier in the show.
Forgot. We always get to the end.
Well, we got into brief history of power for quite a bit.
Yeah,
but,
we got most of them actually.
Patreon's the big one again. So our world doesn't exactly go around with Patreon. Gravity has something to do with it. The resurrection of Jesus is a pretty big deal. I do get paid to be a pastor, but in terms of really making ends meet, your support of us on Patreon is huge for us as a family here in Rockford, Illinois, letting us do what we do in a lot of different directions, including working with the Hebrew Collegium. And not taking our own cut out of that, letting all the resources that are coming to that go toward that. So patreon.com/RevFisk, or just look for RevFisk on Patreon or at RevFisk.com. You can find a link to it. $1.25 a show, $5 a month. That's kind of the standard go. Sometimes people give as much as $20 a show. And we just had a new one show up this week, which is great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It always boosts it for us quite a bit. So that's really helpful. I feel like there was another side question that had to do with promotions, and I'm not going to go chase it down. Mad Christian Mondays, we did that right at the start. Again, sign up at redfist.com/newsletter or go to madpxm.com. That website continues to develop there. And Stop the White Noise is also brought to you. We just said that. So,
yeah, did you want to talk more about the Hebrew Collegium, or did you plug it enough?
I want to plug it more, and I don't want to plug it more all at the same time.
I want you to plug it because I want more people to come. I'm so excited.
Well, it's not like we don't have anyone applying at the moment.
It's like painting and praying for all these people.
Yeah.
It's
Well, again, we've got this amazing
over
facility that's going to be filled with opportunities for personal growth on a number of levels, from the auto shop to the wood shop, to the backyard farming,
livestock,
there's all these opportunities. It's on a lake, and combined with reading the Bible in a year with a group of guys who want to focus their lives on the righteousness they have in Christ, coached by me with a private curriculum where we're going to figure out your trajectory in life and start taking steps toward that, whether that means going back to school, going to school, dropping out of school, whatever it means. We're going to help you set a path for your real goals in this age. I lost it. But more important even than that, then, so the coaching by me, the bonding with the other guys, I think is going to be absolutely huge. That you're going to be spending time with men of character who desire to be men of character, and in that year forming the heart of your identity, as opposed to at some woke school where they're going to give you a bunch of critical race theory, like Concordia University, Wisconsin. You'll be able to be formed by what the scriptures say about manhood. And so from there, take a step out into life, knowing who you are in Christ. Again, there is no tuition. There really isn't any cost to the housing, a couple dollars a month for the lease to just make it all legal. And then you're going to have to pay for your food. But other than that, you're by and large living scot-free on the goodwill of Jesus. So it's an amazing opportunity. Why am I've never been good at self-promoting. I don't like self-promoting.
It is kind of awkward, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really hard. And I'm also, it's like I was saying about the delinquent stuff. Like, I've been praying about this for 2 years. I mean, before it even happened, I was praying about these two houses next door and thinking about how cool it would be to expand them into something that would serve. And so now it's like I don't want to go out and herd the wrong people and convince a bunch of people to come here who don't actually aren't going to benefit from it, or going to cause trouble, or not fit with the group. So it's sort of like let it sit out there and see who really wants this amazing opportunity. If you're going to let it go by you, then you're okay. It's on you, right? So I really do believe that this first inaugural year, the first cohort, God's going to send the right number. We have room for 12. We don't have 12 applied yet. We're almost halfway in terms of tickles, but not full applications. And I don't think we'll get to that full 12. But what I do know is that we'll get the right set of guys who are going to really bond together in an incredible way. And I don't know why you wouldn't want to be that if you had that opportunity, again, to spend a year of your life. I mean, you can go overseas and travel for 4 months or something like that, right? But this is going to be like that. It's going to be a life-altering year. And it's going to alter your life in the Psalms and the Proverbs. It's going to alter your life in your general knowledge of the Bible. It's going to alter your life in your theological knowledge. A couple of these guys are wanting to be pre-sem at some point. Well, we're going to be maybe teaching Hebrew in the house, depending on, again, what they want. But there's just going to be a lot of opportunity for personal growth in your Christian faith. And I wasn't a Christian when I went off to college, so or I wasn't practicing at least. But thinking back on it, that year that I went back to college and then found church again, and then I graduated and I didn't know what to do, and I ended up serving as an English teacher, missionary for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Like that year, I got to meet my wife, so it was a good thing I went where I went. But that year would have been an ideal year for this. This would have been incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Would have been incredible to have something like this. So yeah, the Hebrew Collegium, a gap year Bible school for men here in Rockford, Illinois, and tuition free, housing almost free, good food, can get you nutritiously built up. Oh, there's going to be a jiu-jitsu gym, auto shop, wood shop, backyard husbandry, studio, recording studio, internet studio, and more. So, all while you study the Bible together. Seems like a pretty cool idea. Yeah. How do I transition? It's nighttime. So, that was it. Someone had asked, if we're going to be live tomorrow morning. So if you watched all this way to find out we're not live. So we're here Friday night because our kids who are into jiu-jitsu, a couple of them got invited to try out for the next level of intensity. This is not so much a belt, so much as a different practice session. And tomorrow morning, that's a 2-hour tryout they're going to be having. And I missed the belt ceremony, but I didn't want to miss this. The belts are cool. The belts are fine. Yeah, but this is the real stuff. And so we're going to be there tomorrow to support them in that. And that's why we're here tonight, bringing you Stop the White Noise with Jonathan and Meridith. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Meridith.
And we believe Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, which means he has paid for all humanity, including you, and that makes you immortal now. And he's not going to be long in wrapping up this world with the life of the world to come. The baptism seals it. The Lord's Supper feeds it. This is Christianity. So don't wallow in the muck with those who have no hope, but lift up your head all the more as you see the day approaching, and rock on with your Alleluias.
Was that worth $1? Click the Patreon link in the show notes to sign up. Pretty please?